Now, we know that AIM is the language being used by the Prime Minister. The push from several MPs, including Dave Sharma, is to sign for net zero 2050. Warren Inch, who is also a Liberal MP up in Cairns, he had this to say today about not saying but signing net zero 2050.
I've got every confidence that he'll do the right thing on this one here. My view is the right thing is to, like we did with COVID, we followed the mainstream science. And we forgot about all that on the periphery.
Now, Bronte, I'll let you off the chain in a second, but Dave, I just want to ask, what is the difference between, you've got a deal that puts in place between now and 2030, right? Paris, all of those targets need to be met and we're chugging along well. Why do we need to sign a deal for 20 years after that when the term of government we're about to re-elect only goes for another 3 years into the deal to 2030?
Well, look, the point to note here is no country is signing up at Glasgow to any particular agreement. There's not a new international treaty on the table where world leaders are putting pen to paper. This is a political level commitment that some countries are legislating, other countries are making a declarative commitment, if you like. I think where we are with this, though, is that, I think back to the Kyoto Protocol, and I worked in the Howard government at the time, not as an elected official, as an advisor. And we were in a situation where we were going to meet our Kyoto Protocol targets, but we decided, for reasons of principle, I guess, not to ratify the Kyoto Protocol. And it cost us a huge amount. I think it cost us at the 2007 election for something that was ultimately symbolic because we were going to do it anyway. I think this is the way the world is moving. I think, global capital markets are, investors are, consumers are, banks, financiers, the whole world is moving towards this. And I think we've got a good record. We're already well on the way to reducing our emissions and decarbonising our economy. So I don't want us to get stuck up or fixated on something that is ultimately, totemic commitment in 2050. I think we can make the same commitment that other countries are because we've already got the track record behind us, and we'll put in place the policies to get there. But I just think we shouldn't erect this to being a massive hurdle or speed bump in the road that it's starting to become in Australia. I think it will be damaging to us and ultimately damaging to our national interests as well.
So, Bronwyn, as Dave says, they don't have to pass a law, they don't have to sign a piece of paper. It can be the vague never, never. The signed, passed piece of paper is Paris in 2030.
Look, we don't do that in this country. And immediately you make a statement that you will get rid of all emissions by 2050. It goes into the public service. It becomes rhetoric. You've got people who are working on it. It gets ahead of steam itself. There is no such thing as a statement you can make and pretend it doesn't mean anything. And that argument, I'm sorry, Dave, just doesn't wash. The bottom line is this. We didn't lose 2007 because of the ratification of Kyoto. We lost 2007 because there was an almighty bloody stoush between John Howard and Peter Costello. We lost the plot. And Kevin Rudd came along and he looked like a newer version of John Howard. That's why we lost in 2007. Every other time we've gone to the electorate on the issue of climate change and on the issue of maintaining our source of supply of base load being coal, every time we do it, we win and Labor loses. Why would we give away that advantage when the country's future depends on us maintaining a base load? United States, France, the European Union, Britain, they all have an alternative to coal-fired power stations. We don't. They had nuclear power. We're now getting nuclear subs. Maybe that'll open up the argument that we too can have nuclear power here, which of course doesn't have emissions. And maybe you can start talking about them. But the real issue is this. China is the world's big emitter. How is it that you're a former diplomat, how on earth have we allowed the situation to arise where China can say it's a developing nation and therefore it doesn't have to do anything about anything? If we should get out of the Paris Agreement, we should say, all right, China, when you come back, we will in fact do something ourselves. In the meantime, we might have moved on to start to get nuclear power. But to cut our own throats, to cut our manufacturing potential, just when we're saying that we have to disengage the dependence we've had on China, which has made us sycophants using goods that have come from slave labour, just as we've seen that China has no interest in having a peaceable solution, sees us as a vassal state, which is why we've entered into this new agreement. Just at that time is not the time where we cut our throats and say we're going to have the world's most expensive electricity and our manufacturers can go hang. This is a far more comprehensive policy than giving into a whim of saying people who are thinking it's a lovely idea to say no emissions by 2050. The predictable future just cannot be dealt with in that way.
All right. Dave, what's a brief response to that?
Look, I mean, I'm fundamentally a realist here, Paul, and this is the way the world's moving, like it or not. This is a generational economic transformation that's underway in the world's energy markets, and Australia can either get ahead of this and work it to our natural advantage, and we have a whole lot of comparative advantages in a low-carbon world, including a massive endowment of the raw materials and natural minerals that you need for things like batteries and wind turbines and everything else, as well as a huge amount of solar and wind. Or we can stand astride the tide of history yelling stop, and it'll ultimately run us over. I just want to work with the grain that the world's going. I mean,
and then I'd love to be
able to make the weather in Australia, but we can't. And I'd love the world to be as Bronwyn describes it, but it's not. We have to deal with the world as it is, and it's not the sort of place that she's characterised.